The rain had been steady since dawn, turning the grounds of the Coral Ridge Cemetery into a muted wash of gray and silver. Miami's humid air clung to every fabric, and umbrellas shuddered under the weight of the wind. Rosa Delgado stood beneath a black canopy, her hands folded tightly in front of her. As the last handfuls of soil were lowered onto Alejandro's casket, 40 years of marriage reduced to a smooth mahogany box and a priest's soft benediction drifting into the damp afternoon. People murmured condolences as they passed, neighbors from Coral Gables, former colleagues of Alejandro, distant relatives Rosa barely recognized. She thanked each one quietly, her voice steady despite the hollow ache widening in her chest. But Bianca, her daughter-in-law, stood several feet away, not beside the family, not grieving. Her arms were crossed, her eyes fixed on her phone, thumbs moving with impatient precision as though the burial were an inconvenience. Michael hovered between them, pale and tense, occasionally glancing at his wife as if waiting for direction. He offered Rosa a faint, quick squeeze of the hand at the end of the ceremony, but even that felt like something he wasn't sure he had permission to give. The ride home was silent. Raindrops streaked across the SUV windows while the city blurred by. Palm trees bent in the wind, the neon shimmer of Brickell muted by fog. Rosa sat in the back seat, her purse resting on her lap, her fingers absently gripping the strap the way someone held onto the edge of a cliff. Bianca drove with one hand, the other on her phone mounted to the dashboard, tapping out messages. Michael stared ahead, jaw tight, as if saying anything might trigger something he didn't want to confront. When they finally pulled into the driveway of the Coral Gables house, the first thing Rosa noticed was unfamiliar. The garage door was already open. Her boxes, were stacked near the wall beside a suitcase she hadn't touched since before the funeral. Her shawls, neatly folded, her framed photos wrapped in towels, her toiletries dumped into a plastic shopping bag. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Bianca stepped out of the car first, shaking the rain from her blazer. "Rosa," she began briskly, her tone clipped and managerial. "I've gone ahead and organized your things so we can keep the house running smoothly. You'll be staying in the small service room off the garage from now on. The guest suite is needed for other purposes." Rosa blinked, the words landing sluggishly through the fatigue and grief. "The service room?" she repeated softly, unsure if she was hearing correctly. "It's only temporary," Michael muttered, still avoiding her eyes. He pretended to be adjusting the umbrella, though Rosa could see his hands trembling. Bianca continued, unfazed. "It makes the most sense. The kids are getting older and need more space, and we have people visiting next week. It's better for everyone if we keep things organized." Rosa stood motionless in the garage, the humid air thick around her. She wanted to ask why the decision had been made without her. She wanted to remind them this had been her home for decades. But the words caught in her throat, tangled with exhaustion and the rawness of her loss. Bianca gestured toward the stacked boxes. "Also, while we're adjusting, I'll need help keeping things on schedule. Laundry piles up quickly, and the kids need breakfast before school. You've always been good at routines, so this is the fastest way to get everything back on track." There was no trace of empathy in her voice, only expectation disguised as practicality. Rosa swallowed hard, feeling the first sting of humiliation tighten behind her eyes. She heard the rain still pounding outside, the echo of shovels hitting wet earth not long ago. Alejandro had been gone for barely a day, and already the foundation beneath her feet was shifting. As she lifted her box from the garage floor, her hands trembling slightly under its weight, a quiet realization settled deep in her chest. This was no misunderstanding, no stress-related lapse in judgment, no temporary chaos after a death. This was the first tremor of something far more deliberate and far more cruel. The days that followed settled into a rhythm so sharp and unfamiliar that Rosa felt her life shrinking into a narrow hallway with no doors. Each morning began the same way, the alarm on her small bedside clock buzzing at 5:30 a.m., cutting through the stale air of the service room. She would slip quietly into the main house, her slippers muffled on the tile, and start breakfast before anyone else stirred. Coffee warmed, eggs whisked, uniforms folded and set neatly by the counter, laundry sorted, towels refreshed, dishes washed and dried. By the time the sun crept through the tall windows of the Coral Gables kitchen, Rosa had already completed half a day's worth of housekeeping. Bianca typically drifted downstairs around 9, hair perfectly curled, robe cinched at the waist, complaining about the humidity or the traffic on US 1, never acknowledging how the house came to look so immaculate each morning. She would sip her almond milk latte and scroll through her phone while Rosa moved silently around her. One morning, Rosa passed by the open doorway of the patio and froze. Bianca's voice floated through, loud and careless, as she chatted with 2 neighborhood friends. "Oh, Rosa." Bianca laughed lightly, as if discussing a household appliance. "Honestly, it's like having a free maid around. She cooks, cleans, folds everything. And she never complains. It's convenient." Convenient. The word hit with a dull, bruising force. Rosa stood still, hidden by the hallway wall, feeling her face grow hot. She forced herself to breathe, then quietly stepped back into the kitchen. When Bianca re-entered minutes later, Rosa handed her a clean mug without a word. Bianca didn't notice the tremble in Rosa's fingers. Not everything in the house was cold, though. Sophia and Lucas were constant reminders of warmth. Sophia would hug Rosa tightly before leaving for school, her cheek pressing against Rosa's shoulder for a heartbeat longer than usual. Lucas often lingered in the kitchen, watching Rosa cook with a cautious, almost protective curiosity. One afternoon, Lucas tugged her sleeve. "Grandma," he whispered, "Mom says you live in the little room because it's easier for you. Is that true?" Rosa knelt to meet his eyes, forcing a smile. "It's just for now, sweetheart. Don't worry." But the boy didn't look convinced. Children always sensed what adults tried to bury. As the weeks passed, Michael retreated deeper into his job, leaving before sunrise and returning long after dinner. Conversations dwindled into one-word exchanges. When Rosa tried to ask if he was okay, he brushed it off. "Work's demanding," he said one night, loosening his tie with trembling hands. "We'll talk later." But later never came. Later always belonged to Bianca. With Michael absent, Bianca's control over the household solidified. She began leaving printed schedules on the counter, meal plans, chore lists, reminders about keeping the place tidy. She no longer disguised her directives as suggestions. And then, casually while applying lipstick one afternoon, she said, "You know, Rosa, I've been looking into some really nice assisted living facilities. Beautiful places. Bright. Clean. You'd have your own room. Your own schedule. It might be healthier for you, given everything." Rosa's hand tightened on the dish towel. "I'm fine here," she said calmly. Bianca shrugged, unconcerned. "Well, just think about it. We all need to make decisions that benefit the family. The family, as if Rosa were something outside of it." That night, Rosa sat on the edge of her narrow bed in the service room, the soft hum of the garage echoing in the background. Her world felt smaller than ever, compressed by grief, expectations, and unspoken cruelty. But somewhere beneath the ache, beneath the exhaustion, something else stirred. She had been paying attention, watching, listening, studying every detail. Bianca seemed so sure Rosa was too fragile to notice. And in that quiet clarity, a faint spark glimmered, small, steady, impossible to extinguish. 3 months after the funeral, on a cloudless Tuesday morning, Rosa stepped outside and let the warmth of Miami's sun settle on her shoulders. She stood in the driveway longer than necessary, holding her purse close, as if waiting for courage to arrive. The house behind her felt heavier each day, its walls echoing with Bianca's footsteps, with Michael's silence, with routines that no longer belonged to her. She finally exhaled, got into her car, and drove toward Brickell. Traffic was its usual chaos: honking scooters, buses puffing exhaust, towers of glass shimmering like blades, but Rosa barely noticed. Her fingers tightened around the steering wheel as she approached the office building where attorney Javier Torres had practiced for 40 years. He had been Alejandro's closest friend and legal confidant, attending birthdays, anniversaries, even Sophia's preschool graduation. If anyone could offer clarity, it would be him. Javier greeted her in the lobby with an embrace that held genuine warmth. "Rosa," he said softly, "I've been waiting for your call. Come in." His office overlooked Biscayne Bay, where boats drifted lazily across the water. Rosa sat across from him, hands folded tightly in her lap. For a moment, she simply stared at the framed certificates on his wall, unable to steady her breath. "I didn't know where else to turn," she admitted. Something feels wrong at home." Javier nodded as if he'd sensed this. "Alejandro prepared for everything, Rosa. He wanted to make sure you were protected. All you need to do now is understand what he left behind." He opened a thick binder labeled Delgado Living Trust, sliding it toward her. Rosa hesitated before touching it, her pulse quickening. "First," Javier said gently, "the Coral Gables home. The property wasn't in Alejandro's name alone. He placed it into a revocable living trust 10 years ago. You are the controlling trustee. You decide who lives there. You decide what happens to it." Rosa blinked, stunned. I never knew." "He wanted to spare you the burden," Javier replied, "but he trusted you with everything." Javier flipped to the next section. "Alejandro also moved the bulk of his investments into accounts listing you as the sole beneficiary. Retirement funds, long-term portfolios, government bonds, all in your name." Rosa pressed a hand to her chest. She'd assumed Alejandro had modest savings, comfortable but not extravagant, but the numbers before her were staggering. "And there's more," Javier continued. 2 years ago, he purchased a seaside villa in Cancun. It was meant to be your 40th anniversary surprise. Papers were finalized shortly before his diagnosis. Rosa's breath caught. Cancun had been where they'd honeymooned as young lovers, where Alejandro promised her a lifetime of sunsets and peace. Javier leaned back, hands steepled. "Rosa, your total estate, including real estate, investments, and trusts, comes to a little over $17 million. The room tilted for a moment. Rosa gripped the armrests, overwhelmed by the weight of the revelation. 17 million, a lifetime of careful planning, quiet discipline, and love expressed not through grand gestures, but through protection. As she stared at the documents, another truth surfaced, one far sharper. Bianca hadn't been cruel because she disliked Rosa. She'd been cruel because she believed Rosa had nothing, because she thought Rosa was powerless. Rosa inhaled slowly. For months, she'd lived in a cramped service room, waking before sunrise to scrub someone else's floors, listening to Bianca discuss her like a household appliance, because Bianca assumed Rosa had nowhere else to go, assumed she was dependent, helpless, disposable. And yet here it was. Alejandro had placed everything, every asset, every safeguard, every piece of their life, into Rosa's hands. Shock softened into clarity, clarity into a quiet, steady resolve. Rosa closed the binder with deliberate care. "Thank you, Javier," she said, her voice calm, almost serene. "I know what I need to do now." The next Thursday afternoon, Rosa finished folding the last of the laundry and stepped into the hallway just in time to see Bianca glide past the front door with a silk tote on her arm. She wasn't dressed for errands or school pickup. She wore heels, a fitted dress, and a spark of perfume that Rosa hadn't smelled in months. Going somewhere special. Rosa asked quietly. Bianca didn't break stride. A meeting, she said, tapping her phone. Nothing you need to worry about. The door clicked shut behind her. For a moment, Rosa stood frozen. Something in Bianca's tone, too light, too casual, almost breathless, triggered a flicker of intuition she could no longer ignore. She checked the kitchen clock. Nearly 3 p.m., Michael wouldn't be home until late. Sophia and Lucas were still at school. The house was empty. The silence gave Rosa room to move. She grabbed her keys. Bianca's car was easy to spot, a white Mercedes coupe slicing through Miami traffic, heading toward Brickell. Rosa followed at a cautious distance. Gripping the wheel each time, Bianca changed lanes aggressively, as if rushing towards something she'd been anticipating all day. Eventually, the Mercedes pulled into the circular driveway of the Four Seasons Hotel, a gleaming tower of glass and marble overlooking Biscayne Bay. Rosa parked across the street, her heartbeat loud in her ears. She watched Bianca step out, smooth her dress, and glance around with the nervous excitement of someone about to see a lover, not attend a meeting. Moments later, a man emerged from the lobby. Younger, taller, stylish in a way that felt curated, open collar, expensive watch. The swagger of someone who lived off charm more than competence. Ethan Rhodes. Rosa didn't know his name yet, but everything about him radiated arrogance, wrapped in youth. Bianca reached him first, her smile blooming wide as she placed a hand on his arm. Ethan leaned in, kissing her cheek with an intimacy that belonged nowhere near a married woman. Then she handed him a slim folder, documents of some kind. He flipped through them, quickly nodding, before tucking the papers into his bag. Their conversation grew hushed, their gestures too close, too practiced. Rosa stepped behind a column outside the hotel entrance, close enough to overhear fragments. Once the inheritance is secured, we just need Michael to stay clueless. You'll finally be free. Your debts will be gone. Debts? Whose? The question spun like sparks inside Rosa's chest. She leaned carefully against the marble column, keeping herself hidden while absorbing every damning word. When Bianca and Ethan disappeared into the hotel lounge, Rosa slipped back to her car, her breathing shallow but controlled. She drove home slowly, her mind no longer clouded by grief, but sharpened into something cold and precise. By the time she reached the Coral Gables driveway, the house was empty again. Bianca wouldn't be back for hours. Rosa walked inside, setting her purse on the counter. Something tugged at her, an instinct honed by months of silent watching. She stepped into Bianca's office nook. The laptop was open, unlocked. Rosa's pulse quickened, but her hands remained steady as she inched closer. The emails on the screen confirmed everything she feared and more. A folder labeled Delgado Divorce Draft. Emails with Ethan discussing timelines, asset division, and what Michael doesn't need to know. A message from Ethan. I can't keep. The collector's off forever. I need cash. Fust. Another from Bianca. Once his mom is out of the picture, everything becomes ours. Rosa felt the betrayal deepen, settling like stone inside her chest. But there were no tears, no trembling, only a growing, strategic calm. She pulled out her phone and took pictures of every email, every draft, every mention of gambling debt, every proof of disloyalty. Click, click, click. When she was done, she closed the laptop exactly as she'd found it. Then she walked out of the office, her steps slow, deliberate, grounded by a new truth. Bianca wasn't just cruel, she was dangerous. And Rosa was finally ready to stop being blind. The house was unusually quiet that afternoon. Rosa had just finished wiping down the kitchen counters when she heard the garage door rumble open, far earlier than Michael ever returned. He stepped inside still in his work clothes, his tie loosened, the tension in his shoulders unmistakable. In his hands were two thick binders. Rosa recognized them instantly. Javier's binders. The Delgado Living Trust. Her pulse tightened, but she kept her posture calm as he set the binders on the kitchen island with a dull thud. "Mom," he said, his voice strained, "I found these on the porch. Javier must have had them delivered while I was out." He flipped one open with trembling fingers. "Why didn't you tell me any of this?" Rosa swallowed. She had known this conversation would come eventually, but not like this. "I didn't hide anything from you, Michael. Your father took care of the paperwork. He handled all of it quietly. He wanted you focused on your own life." Michael shook his head, flipping through the pages again. "But the trust, the accounts, the house," he pointed to the documents, his voice cracking. "Mom, the Coral Gables house is in your name. You're the trustee. You have full control over everything. Why didn't you say something?" "Because your father asked me not to burden you," Rosa answered softly. "He didn't believe it was information you needed until we were ready to talk together. And then he got sick. Everything happened too fast." Michael pressed a hand to his forehead, pacing. The realization weighing on him was too heavy, too sudden. Footsteps pounded down the stairs. Bianca appeared, hair perfectly styled, irritation already etched across her face. "What's going on?" she demanded, spotting the binders. Within seconds her expression shifted. First confusion, then shock, then something darker. "Why do you have those?" Michael turned the binder toward her. "Did you know about this?" Bianca's eyes darted across the pages, trust documents, property deeds, investment summaries. She snapped the binder shut. "This is obviously some kind of manipulation. Rosa must have pressured Alejandro." "Don't!" Michael warned sharply, his voice slicing through the air. "Don't do that right now." Bianca folded her arms, recovering quickly. "Michael, she's trying to turn you against me. She's been trying for months." Rosa shook her head calmly. "I never said a word to him. He found the binders himself." Bianca's voice rose, brittle and panicked. Look at her pretending to be innocent. She wanted to control everything. Michael slammed the binder down, so hard the sound echoed through the house. "Stop! Just stop!" The room froze. He took a breath, then spoke the words that shattered the illusion Bianca had built around him for years. "Mom owns this house." Bianca blinked. "What?" "Mom is the trustee," Michael continued, his voice steadier now. "She controls the estate. Not me. Not you. Her." Bianca's mouth opened, then closed. Her face flushed deep red. Michael took another step toward her. "The truth finally erupting after months of pressure. And you lied to me, Bianca. You made me believe Mom needed to be managed. That she was helpless. That she needed to be pushed out. When all along, she's manipulating you." Bianca snapped, desperation sharpening the edges of her voice. "You know how she is." "No," Michael cut in, quieter but deadlier. "I know how you are." The silence that followed was thick and immovable. Bianca's breath trembled as she looked between them, realizing the ground beneath her had vanished. Without another word, she spun on her heel and stormed upstairs. Drawers slammed, hangers clattered. Within minutes, she reappeared, dragging a suitcase behind her. "This is insane," she hissed. "You'll regret choosing her over your own wife." Michael didn't respond. Bianca reached the front door, threw it open, and turned back long enough to spit out one final insult, something sharp and venomous, before stepping into the humid Miami air and disappearing down the driveway. The door slammed behind her, the echo reverberating through the house like a fault line cracking open. Rosa remained still, watching her son stare at the floor. The weight of everything, months of manipulation, guilt, confusion, finally crashing down on him. It was the moment everything unraveled, and the moment the truth finally surfaced. The days after Bianca's departure settled over the house like a dense, unmoving fog. Silence clung to every room, heavy, awkward, unfamiliar. Even the usual noises of a home with children felt muted. Sophia's cheerful chatter dimmed. Lucas grew quieter at the dinner table. And Michael, he moved like a man carrying a weight he had no idea how to set down. Rosa returned to the main bedroom that Alejandro once shared with her, but there was no sense of victory in reclaiming the space. She stood in the doorway on the first night, her hand brushing over the familiar quilt, the faint scent of lavender still lingering on the pillows. Instead of triumph, a deep exhaustion washed over her, bone-deep and emotional, the kind that came from months of bending herself, small, just to survive. She sat on the edge of the bed, looking around slowly. This was her room, her home. Her husband's memories lived in every corner. Yet all she felt was a grief intertwined with disbelief at how easily the ground had shifted beneath her feet. The next morning, while Rosa prepared breakfast, Sophia wandered into the kitchen, dragging her backpack behind her. "Grandma," she whispered, tugging at Rosa's sleeve. "Is Mom coming back?" Rosa knelt down, brushing a loose curl behind the girl's ear. "I don't know yet, sweetheart," she said softly. "But whatever happens, you're loved. That's what matters." Sophia nodded, though her eyes glistened. Lucas later asked a similar question, his voice wavering. Rosa gave him the same answer, gentle, steady, without casting blame. She never spoke poorly of Bianca. Children, Rosa knew, carried enough weight on their own without being asked to judge a parent. Michael avoided the kitchen for days, choosing instead to leave early and come home after the children were asleep. On the fifth evening, Rosa found him sitting alone in the backyard, shoulders slumped forward, his tie discarded on the grass beside him. "I made such a mess, Mom," he said without looking up. His voice was thick with shame. "I let her convince me you were. I let her make decisions for me. I didn't protect you." Rosa took a slow breath before sitting beside him. "You were overwhelmed, confused, grieving." "That's not an excuse," Michael whispered, pressing his palms to his eyes. "No," Rosa agreed, her tone steady, "but it is an explanation." For the first time since Bianca left, Michael looked at her. His eyes were tired red. "I'm starting therapy tomorrow. I need to understand why I let things happen the way they did. Why I couldn't stand up for you. For myself." Rosa nodded gently, a quiet relief unfolding in her chest. "That's a good step," she said. "I'm proud of you." He leaned back, exhaling shakily, as if releasing a burden he had carried for far too long. Over the following weeks, the house began to shift. Small changes at first, Michael joining the kids for dinner, the laughter slowly returning to the living room, the schedules on the kitchen counter disappearing. Rosa didn't say anything, but she noticed every sign of healing. She also saw something new in her son, something fragile but promising. A man trying to rebuild himself after years of surrendering his voice, his judgment, his confidence. She understood then that Michael was not cruel. He had simply been weakened over time, conditioned by Bianca's quiet manipulations to question his instincts and defer his choices. Grief still lingered, weaving through every room, but so did understanding. And in that understanding, the first seeds of healing took root. It happened on a humid Friday afternoon, just as Rosa finished watering the hibiscus plants along the patio. She heard a car engine in the driveway, loud and patient, revving harder than necessary. When she stepped inside, Michael was already standing near the foyer, frozen in place, his expression caught between disbelief and dread. Bianca stood in the doorway, but she wasn't alone. Ethan Rhodes lingered behind her, sunglasses pushed into his hair, shirt unbuttoned just a little too low, looking around the Delgado home as if imagining where he might place his belongings. Bianca walked in first, shoulders squared, her expression carved into something cold and sharp. "We need to talk," she announced. Michael stiffened. "You're not supposed to be here, Bianca." She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, please. I'm still the children's mother, and we're going to make arrangements, civilized ones. She stepped deeper into the foyer, heels clicking against the tile. I think we can all agree that fighting benefits no one. Rosa appeared at the end of the hallway. Bianca turned toward her with a smile so artificial it almost glowed. Rosa, she said brightly. Good. You're here. Rosa remained silent. Bianca took a breath, switching to her practiced honeyed tone. Since we've all had time to cool off, here's what I'm proposing. A settlement. $3 million. Cash. In exchange, I promise to keep things civil for the kids. No court battles. No drama. Michael's face reddened. $3 million? Bianca, have you lost your mind? Ethan stepped forward, folding his arms. It's a fair number. Bianca just wants what she's entitled to. Rosa didn't move, didn't flinch. Simply observed, with the same quiet clarity she had honed over months of humiliation. Bianca continued, If we refuse to settle this privately, I'll have no choice but to involve the courts. And her voice dropped to a chilling whisper. I'll have to raise questions about Rosa's mental stability. Michael's voice cracked. What? Well, Bianca shrugged. She's been confused, forgetful, emotional. It wouldn't be hard to show she's not capable of managing such a large estate. A competency evaluation would clarify things. And if the state steps in, she paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Control over certain assets could shift. Rosa's hands tightened at her sides, but her expression remained serene. And of course, Bianca added with a sigh, the children might need to speak to someone, maybe even in court. It's stressful, I know, but if you force my hand, enough. Michael's voice came out louder than he intended. Bianca lifted her chin. Then let's be reasonable. Rosa stepped forward at last, moving with a calmness that unsettled everyone in the room. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft, almost gentle. Bianca, she said, I want to show you something. Bianca smirked. What? A guilt trip. Rosa reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. With slow, deliberate movements, she opened a folder of photos, each one crisp, damning, undeniable. She held the screen toward Bianca. A photograph of Bianca and Ethan embracing at the Four Seasons. Another of Bianca handing him documents. Another of them holding hands. And then the emails, screenshots in perfect resolution. Drafted divorce papers. Plans to extract funds before leaving. Mentions of Ethan's gambling debt, desperate and explicit. Lines discussing how to keep Michael in the dark until everything is finalized. Bianca's face drained of color. Rosa's tone remained steady. If you pursue a competency evaluation, everything you see here will become part of the legal record. Everything you sent, everything you planned, everything he owes. Ethan stepped back as if the evidence physically pushed him away. Bianca, he hissed, you said. Shut up, she snapped, eyes darting wildly, panic cracking her voice. Rosa lowered her phone. Any court, any judge, any guardian ad litem, they'll see the truth. Not mine. Yours. Bianca's breath stuttered. Her shoulders sagged, the facade she had worn like armor dissolving into something small and desperate. You think you've won, she whispered, though the conviction was gone. No, Rosa replied softly. I think I'm done losing. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Bianca grabbed her purse with trembling hands and stormed out, Ethan trailing behind her, muttering curses under his breath. The front door slammed. The house exhaled. In the stillness that followed, Rosa didn't smile, didn't gloat, didn't even look triumphant. But the quiet around her felt different, cleaner, truer. A moral victory without raising her voice. A quiet triumph earned through truth, not fury. The legal process moved faster than anyone expected. Once Bianca realized how much evidence existed, how thoroughly her plans had been documented, her threats evaporated. Within a week, Michael filed for divorce. There were no counterclaims, no dramatic courtroom objections, no fight left in her. Bianca signed every document her attorney put in front of her, her once flawless confidence replaced by silence and resignation. For Michael, the sigh he released when the papers were finalized was not relief, it was grief. Grief for the life he thought he had. Grief for the woman he realized he never truly knew. But mostly grief for the version of himself who had allowed so much damage to happen under his own roof. Custody negotiations, surprisingly, were calm. Bianca had no leverage left. Every attorney who looked at the file saw the same picture. A woman whose recent actions made joint decision-making impossible. The court ordered a stability-focused arrangement, placing primary custody with Michael. Bianca would have supervised visitation until a formal evaluation was completed. When Michael told the children, he did it gently. Sophia cried quietly, curling into Rosa's side. Lucas asked if their mother would ever live with them again. Michael didn't promise anything. He didn't know what the future held, but he assured them both that they would always be safe, always loved. As the dust settled, Rosa made a decision she had been thinking about for weeks. One evening, after the kids were asleep, she sat with Michael at the dining table. The room was dim, illuminated only by the pendant light above them. "I'm setting up education trusts for the children," she said, sliding 2 folders across the table. Michael blinked. "Mom." "You don't have to. I know," she interrupted softly, "but I want to." He opened the folders, seeing detailed plans Javier Torres had prepared, college funds, emergency provisions, stipulations for responsible usage. "There are conditions," Rosa added. "They must finish high school and college if they choose. They must learn the value of work. They must stay kind, and," her voice warmed, "they must stay connected to their family." Michael nodded, tears forming but not falling. "They will." Rosa reached for her tea, letting silence stretch peacefully between them. For the first time since Alejandro's funeral, this house felt like a home again, not perfect, not healed, but breathing. Later that week, Michael approached her once more, standing awkwardly in the living room with his hands in his pockets. "Mom," he began, his voice low, "I know I've apologized, but I want to say it again. Not because I expect anything from you, just because it needs to be said." Rosa waited quietly. "I should have protected you. I should have seen what was happening. I don't expect forgiveness. I hope I can be better. A better father. A better son." Rosa looked at him, the boy she raised, the man reshaping himself in front of her. "You already started," she said. "That's enough." In the still moments before bed that night, as she stood at her window overlooking the quiet Coral Gable Street, Rosa felt something unexpected rise in her chest. Not relief, not victory, something gentler, renewal, a cautious, flickering hope. And beneath it, a thought she hadn't dared touch before. Maybe her life wasn't tied to Miami anymore. Maybe a new chapter waited somewhere she hadn't yet looked. The idea didn't frighten her. It stirred her. In the quiet weeks that followed the divorce, Rosa found herself moving through the Coral Gables house like a guest, someone passing through rooms that no longer felt like her own. Alejandro's guitar still leaned against the study wall. The framed photographs they once chose together still hung in the hallway. Yet none of it brought comfort anymore. Every corner, every shadow, every familiar scent carried a memory bruised by what had unfolded under this roof. One evening, while packing away some linens, Rosa paused with her hands resting on the folded fabric. She understood then, clearly, simply, without drama, that this house held too much of her pain, too much humiliation, too much silence, too many echoes of the months she spent shrinking herself to survive. The decision rose within her like a tide that could no longer be resisted. She would leave Miami. She would go to see Cancun, permanently. The villa Alejandro bought as a secret, loving surprise had been waiting for her. Now, it felt like an invitation not just from her late husband, but from the life she had forgotten she was allowed to live. When she told Michael, he stood very still, as if bracing for an impact. "You're leaving," he said quietly, his voice thin. "For good." Rosa nodded. "It's time. This house. I can't breathe here anymore." He swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "I understand. I do." But his voice broke. "I'm going to miss you, Mom." She stepped forward and placed a hand on his cheek, the way she did when he was a boy afraid of thunderstorms. "Leaving doesn't mean disappearing," she said. "You and the children are part of me. Always." Sophia and Lucas handled the news with the open honesty only children could offer. Sophia clung to her grandmother for a long time, tears soaking into Rosa's blouse. Lucas hugged her tightly, promising he'd call every Sunday morning, no matter what. "We'll see each other for Christmas, right?" Sophia whispered. "And your birthdays," Rosa said softly. "And summer, if you want it." Michael exhaled, nodding. "We'll make it work. Weekly calls. The kids can fly out for holidays when school allows. I'll bring them down myself." The morning Rosa left, the air was warm and still, the sky a pale blue, softened by early daylight. She stood in the driveway beside her packed suitcases while a car idled quietly at the curb. Michael hugged her first, tight, unguarded. "I'm proud of you," he murmured. She smiled faintly. "I'm proud of you, too." Sophia pressed a seashell necklace she made into Rosa's hands. Lucas gave her a drawing of the family. Rosa tucked both into her bag with care. When she finally climbed into the car, Rosa looked back through the window. The house still stood solid and elegant, but it no longer anchored her. What anchored her now lived in the faces of her son and grandchildren, and in the promise of the place waiting for her across the water. As the car eased away from the curb, Rosa felt a bittersweet warmth rise in her chest. Grief and hope braided together, dignified and gentle. She was not running away. She was finally choosing herself. 6 months passed quietly, like waves smoothing the sand after a long storm. In Cancun, Rosa found a rhythm so gentle and natural it felt as if the city itself had been waiting for her. Each morning, she woke before the heat thickened, stepping onto the villa's terrace where the Caribbean stretched out in shades of turquoise and gold. She walked along the shoreline at sunrise, letting the salt air clear whatever traces of her old life still clung to her. Her days were simple, full in a way Miami had not been for years. She enrolled in a local painting class, something she once dreamed of doing but never found time for. She chose bright colors, corals, ochres, ocean blues, and felt her hands steady, her breath deepen, her imagination stretch. The teacher, a woman with silver hair and a warm laugh, often told Rosa that her canvases looked like healing. Rosa believed it. She also began volunteering twice a week at a small community clinic tucked between a bakery and a school. She helped with patient intake, comforted anxious families, occasionally translated for tourists. The work grounded her. It reminded her of the life she had built before becoming a mother and a wife, the part of herself that had always found purpose in serving others. And in the quiet moments when she opened the windows and let the sea breeze fill the villa, Rosa realized she felt younger, not in body but in spirit. Her shoulders no longer carried fear or humiliation. Her breath was no longer tight with uncertainty. She lived lightly, fully, with the soft but steady confidence of someone who had reclaimed her life, one deliberate step at a time. When Michael and the children arrived for their first visit, Rosa felt tears prick her eyes the moment she saw them walking out of the airport. Sophia running ahead with her suitcase bouncing behind her, Lucas waving. Michael carrying too many bags as usual, but he was different. His face looked clearer, unshadowed. He hugged her with an ease she hadn't felt from him in years. "Therapy's helping," he admitted later, sitting with her on the terrace after the kids had gone to bed. I'm learning how to undo the things I let happen, how to show up better. You're already doing it, Rosa said gently. The visit was warm and unhurried. They cooked together, played in the waves, explored small markets, and watched street performers on balmy nights. The children called the villa Grandma's paradise. On their last day, Rosa felt a pang of sadness, but it wasn't the sharp, clinging sadness of before. It was soft, loving, a reminder that her family was healing too, in their own time, in their own way. One evening, after they had returned to Miami, Rosa's phone buzzed with a number she recognized instantly. A single text appeared. I'm sorry for everything. Bianca, Rosa stared at it for a long moment. No anger rose in her. No satisfaction. Just a quiet certainty that some wounds didn't need reopening. She deleted the message without responding. It wasn't revenge. It was release. That night, Rosa carried a cup of tea onto the terrace. The sun was melting into the horizon, casting a warm, honeyed glow across the water. Pelicans skimmed low over the waves. The sky shifted to pink, then purple, then a deepening blue. Rosa closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Alejandro. Not for the money, not for the house, but for the strength he'd always believed she had. Strength she finally saw in herself." As the last light faded, Rosa felt a quiet triumph settle into her bones. No shouting, no spectacle, just peace, freedom reclaimed, dignity restored. A victory that needed no noise at all,